Good morning, Wareham. Wednesday, January 16th. We have a great show here for you. News headlines, weather report, and today in history. Chris Maureen from the Independence House is here this morning. During our coffee segment, Chris will educate us about the sexual and domestic violence facing women and men and the services that the Independence House offers, especially for women on the Cape. But first, I would like to take this moment to thank Not Your Average Antiques, an antique shop down Cranberry Highway in East Wareham, for donating the props that you see behind me in a Good Morning Wareham set. So stay tuned because the weather, traffic, and the news headlines are next. Take it back. Get your sunblock out. It will be sunny all day. Highs at 40. Winds at 10 to 20 miles per hour. Expect clear skies tonight. Lows at 18 and winds at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Tomorrow is going to be a mix of sun and clouds. We will see highs at 29 degrees and lows at 22. There is a 60% chance of snow tomorrow night. Snow showers are expected to develop after midnight, leading to Friday. For your traffic report, expect normal traffic at Route 3 and 495. The weather conditions are good, so safe travels. And now for the news headlines. There were a few news stories over the week, and here are the headlines. Wareham Week is bustling with these news headlines. Onset historic Glen Cove Hotel to open on January 17th. A historical Onset landmark will reopen on January 17th after a massive year-long renovation. Purchased on 2012 by the Serrano family owners of Mark Anthony's Pizzeria and Serrano's Seaside Function Hall, the Glen Cove Hotel at 167 Onset Ave boasts 14 redesigned guest rooms and a restaurant with the capacity of more than 100 people. John Serrano shared this statement: "I think the cat is out of the bag when it comes to Onset. We are not a hidden gem anymore, and it's about time to get this place back on the map." On the other news, Fitchburg State valedictorian, Wareham native, reflects on the academic career. Looking back on the impressive academic career, Queen Staley credits a Wareham middle school teacher for showing her that creativity could inform and not clash with an education. In fact, that lesson helped guide the Pittsburgh State University valedictorian to the field of communications. When asked which Wareham Public Schools teacher inspired you the most, Mr. Brian Fitzgerald of her 8th grade history class was her response. Continuing with the student news, Wareham Historical Society awards students $2,000 in scholarship. The Wareham students received $1,000 each on Monday, January 14th from the Wareham Historical Society to help them continue their college education. Both students will be attending the Bridgewater State University. And now to the town politics. 3 new candidates pulled nomination papers in Wareham. As of January 14th, 3 more candidates have pulled nomination papers to enter the races for selectmen, school committee, and housing authority this April. 2 additional candidates seeking re-election have also pulled papers for the Board of sewer commissioners, and the school committee. In total, there are 10 seats in this election circle that need people, including board of assessors, town clerk, and the town moderator. Wareham Planning Board okays claiming stamp removal plan. An ongoing neighborhood dispute about stamp removal plan for a 5-acre property off Broges Point Road owned by the Clemmy family ended Monday night as the planning board gave the family the go-ahead to remove the 3 stamps where they had cut down several trees on their land. The approval came with conditions. And for the state news, Wicked Local Wareham was buzzing with this headline: accuracy, citizenship, and politics to play a role in 2020 census. U.S. Census, a decennial head count of every person living in the United States, is still a year away, but the local, state, and federal officials in January officially kicked off the process in Massachusetts. John Barr, Census Program Manager at the Massachusetts Secretary of Commonwealth, offered these remarks. When people think of the 2020 census, they think about just counting numbers, but we have been working on this now for 3 years. That is all I have for the news headlines. And now to the story of the day. We'll be right back after this brief break. Next Monday is the Martin Luther King Day that accompanies a special tradition in Wareham. The New Bedford Wareham Boys and Girls Club hosts a breakfast at the Boys and Girls Club place in Onset. The breakfast is open to the public. Tickets are on sale at the moment and until Monday. So get your tickets ahead of time. You can contact Kenny Fonts, who is the director of the New Bedford Wareham Boys and Girls Club, to see if you can get your ticket. The breakfast, I said, it's going to be speakers there to talk about what Martin Luther Jr. King Day means to the community and to them, and at the end of the day you get to enjoy a warm breakfast sponsored by I'll get back to you on that. I'm sorry about that. But so people across the nation, big and small, will be reflecting on the accomplishments of the civil rights movement across decades as they recite the King's Dream. And here in Wareham, we are not an exception to that. So take a look at this video. We shall overcome. We shall overcome
am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
50 years ago, a great American,
in whose symbolic shadow we stand today,
signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
This momentous decree came as a great beacon of light and hope
to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice.
It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity.
But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free.
100 years later,
the life of the Negro is sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation
and the chains of discrimination.
100 years later,
the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty,
in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity.
100 years later,
the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society
and finds himself in exile in his own land.
And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check.
When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence,
they were signing a promissory note for which all Americans were to fall heir.
This note was a promise that all men,
yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights
of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note.
Insofar as her citizens of color are concerned,
instead of honoring the sacred obligation,
America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds.
But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt.
We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds
in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation.
And so we've come to cash this check.
This check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom
and the security of justice.
We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now.
This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off,
or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism.
Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy.
Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation
to the sunlit path of racial justice.
Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice.
Do that sound like a brotherhood.
Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment.
The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent
will not pass until there's an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality.
1963 is not an end, but a beginning.
And those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam
and will now be content will have a rude awakening
if the nation returns to business as usual.
There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights.
The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation
until the bright day of justice emerges.
But there's something I must say to my people
who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice,
in the process of gaining our rightful place.
We must not be guilty of wrongful deeds.
Let's not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred.
We must forever conduct our struggle
on the high plane of dignity and discipline.
We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence.
Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights
of meeting physical force with soul force.
The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people.
For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today,
have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny.
And they have come to realize that
their freedom.
Is inextricably bound by our freedom.
We cannot walk alone.
And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we will always march ahead.
We cannot turn back.
There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights,
when will you be satisfied?
We can never be satisfied.
As long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality.
We can never be satisfied.
As long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel,
Cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways or the hotels of the cities.
We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility
is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one.
We can never be satisfied.
As long as our children are stripped of their
selfhood and robbed of their dignity with signs saying, "For whites only."
We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi
cannot vote, and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote.
No, we are not satisfied.
And we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters.
And righteousness like a mighty stream.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of trials and tribulations.
Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells.
And some of you have come from areas where your quest
for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality.
You have been the veterans of creative suffering.
Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive.
Go back to Mississippi.
Go back to Alabama.
Go back to South Carolina.
Go back to Georgia.
Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities,
knowing that something can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in a valley of despair.
I say to you today, my friends,
even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream.
It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners
will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood.
I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi,
a state sweltering with the heat of injustice,
sweltering with the heat of oppression,
will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation
where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
I have a dream today.
I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama,
with its vicious racists,
with this governor having his lips dripping with the words interposition and nullification.
One day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls
will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls as brothers and sisters.
I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted,
and every hill and mountain shall be made low, and the rough places will be made plain,
and the crooked places will be made straight.
And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed,
and all flesh shall see it together.
This is our hope.
And this is the faith that I go back to the South with.
With this faith,
we'll be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope.
And with this faith, we'll be able to transform the jangling discord of this nation
into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood.
with this faith, we will be able to work together.
To pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together.
To stand up for freedom together.
Knowing that we will be free one day, and this will be the day.
This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning.
My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing.
Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride.
From every mountainside, let freedom ring.
And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire.
Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York.
Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania.
Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado.
Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California.
But not only that.
Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee.
Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi.
From every mountainside, let freedom ring.
And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet,
from every state and every city,
we will be able to speed up that day when all God's children,
black men and white men, Protestants and Catholics, Jews and Gentiles,
will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual.
Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
A remarkable video. And here is another special way of honoring Dr. King. Wicked Local had this article. As part of the Martin Luther King Jr. Day 2019 of service, the Junior Onset Bay Association, a community service group open to kids of all ages and abilities, is doing a beach cleanup at Onset Beach on Monday, January 21st from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Participants will be meeting up at 11 a.m. at the Onset Pier end of the beach in front of Namasket Kayak to hand out gloves and trash bags. The plan is to get the beach looking pristine. Rain and snow date is the following Saturday on the 26th. Sign up can be done online to attend the cleanup at www.allforgood.org. Or you can contact Sarah and Zora at 401-649-3546. That is 401-649-3546. So far, about 10 young youth have signed up for the day. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break. Hello and thank you for being with us this morning. We are broadcasting right from our WCTV studio in Wareham. This is Good Morning Wareham, your source for local news, weather, traffic, and more information. And now for the moment in history. Let's take a look at where we were today in history. Okay, so I have these history fun facts for you. The first one is, annually alcoholic beverages make over 200 billion a year in the United States. However, exactly 1 century ago, the United States government tried to stop all of that. Today, January 16th, 2019, marks the 100-year anniversary of the beginning of prohibition. The 18th Amendment, also known as Prohibition Amendment, was passed by Congress in December of 1917 and took 13 months to take effect. The amendment prohibits manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors for beverages purpose. Later, in 1919, Congress passed the Volstead Act despite a veto by President Woodrow Wilson. This act created a unit in the government that would focus on enforcing the ban on booze. The United States would repeal prohibition in 1933 with the 21st Amendment, as noticing that prohibition fueled organized crime rings and people still consumed alcohol. Today we see ourselves in the midst of another turning point in our country's culture and legislation as a different controversial substance, marijuana, is gaining recognition across the United States. By 1945, the world had been in turmoil for several years as the Second World War ravaged countries all over the globe. However, the end drew a bit nearer on January 16, 1945. This day in history, Adolf Hitler, leader of Nazi Germany during World War II, retreated into his bunker in Berlin, 5 stories below his headquarters. He remained in his base almost exclusively for 105 days, only rarely coming out. On April 30th, after hearing that the Russians were closing in, Hitler and his wife, Eva Braun, reportedly committed suicide and had their remains cremated. While this did not mark the end of war, it brought with it the end of European campaign just 8 days later when the Nazis surrendered. Now, for some lighter news, we go to our ongoing look at who is celebrating their birthday today. Today, both Lin-Manuel Miranda and Albert Pujols celebrate their 39th birthday. Both born in New York City, Miranda is a man of many talents. He can sing, he can act, and compose. This Grammy and Tony Award winner is best known for creating the extremely popular musical Hamilton. You may also recognize him for his role of Jack in the 2018 film of Mary Poppins Returns. Albert Pujols is one of the most prolific hitters in baseball history. Winning 2 World Series with the St. Louis Cardinals, he currently plays for the Los Angeles Angels. His current accomplishment rank 3 league MVPs, a 10-time All-Star, and the sixth most home runs of all time. This concludes this day in history report. For all of you celebrating your big day, happy birthday. For more cool historical facts, please go online under history.com to learn more. Please stay with us. The coffee segment is next, but first, let's take a look at our calendar. Hello, and thank you for being with us this morning. This is Good Morning Wareham. We are broadcasting live from our WCTV studio at 505 Main Street, Wareham. And this is the coffee segment. I'm joined by Chris Maureen, the Director of Prevention, Education, and Outreach at Independence House. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Now, the Independence House has a lot of programs there. So I would like to show our viewers a little bit of one of the most popular events that you host. This was 2 years ago when we met at Cape Cod Community College. Yes, it was the Clothesline Project.
Yes.
All right, so take a look at this, please.
We don't put language to it. We talk around it a lot.
I didn't even realize I had a history of abuse as to what happened to me in my childhood until I saw that first Clothesline Project that very first day. I thought this was how everybody treated their kids and that it was definitely my fault.
They may look like someone's laundry or a display of an art project. But look again. These are not decorations. These are the testimonies, confessions of horrors that women, children, and even men have had to go through. "700 shirts are hanging just outside the Maureen Muffin Wilkins Hall at the Cape Cod Community College. This is the Clothesline Project. Each shirt was written by a person who have encountered, who has fought, or who has lost a life because of sexual violence.
It started here on the Cape in 1990. Activists, artists, survivors got together to create a project that would talk about the issue.
This is the largest display ever of the Clothesline Project here on the campus, and Chris and I really had this idea last year that we would show them all because it's not a little problem, it's a big problem, not only on Cape Cod but everywhere. Many of our students are still, as you can see by this display, many of our members of our community are victims or have to live as survivors of sexual violence. So we wanted to show the Clothesline Project in its entirety, or as much as we could.
I originally became interested in this when I saw the very first project of 33 shirts went up in the fall of 1990 as part of the Take Back the Night March and Rally in Hyannis. And I read the shirts and I went, oh, I don't know what this is about. I don't know any of these people. And by the time I got to the end of the line, I realized that probably half of the shirts were my friends. But back in 1990, no one was talking about this. There were no laws about violence against women. There were no statistics keeping in the police department. There was no blotter line that said domestic assault, domestic violence, sexual assault, domestic violence. So it was just assault and battery, murder. So there was no legitimized way of knowing just exactly how big this problem was.
was filmed 2 years ago now. That was corrected. I thought it was only 1 year ago. Just tells you how fast time goes. But that was the Clothesline Project, one of the projects that you do at the Independence House.
Yes. So much of our work is, besides services, direct services to the clients, is awareness, because it's a subject matter that people don't want to talk about. The Clothesline Project, I don't know what was said on the video, but began here on the Cape in 1991, I believe, by sexual assault survivors. And they wanted to create an awareness event so that this subject would be at least talked about in some form. So since then, we've acquired over 1,000 T-shirts. It's become a national and international program around the world. And the college is a very supportive collaborator with us. We do a lot of things at the college, and that particular day we put out about 800 T-shirts. When I bring the Clothesline Project around to the Cape at low libraries or town greens, we have a small segment of that, the T-shirts.
You know, I'm thinking to myself, normally with projects or a party or whatever, you want as many people to show up. You want as many people to participate. But in this case, when you're talking about 800 T-shirts, T-shirts, that is not a good thing to see that many T-shirts, because because of the message of those T-shirts. Each of those T-shirts represents a victim or a survivor.
Yes.
And that is not all of them. That's just the few who have said, I'm okay to disclose this about myself.
Absolutely.
So I just want our viewers to understand that the 800, yes, many people came.
Over the years, yeah.
But on this particular segment, it's not a good reflection.
It's yeah, and it's not a reflection of Cape Cod. It's a reflection of our general culture. But just for another statistic, I asked the DA's office, who also covers the islands, but I asked them if I could have some numbers of domestic and sexual violence cases in the last year and a half. So from January 2016 to July 2018, there were over 4,000 cases that went before the District Attorney's Office on the Cape and Islands. That's a lot of cases for this little spit of land. Also, that's only the cases that made it to the District Attorney's Office. So we have a lot of things that do not go through the legal system as far as clients that we see.
And you said it's a lot of cases while looking at just the Cape Cod and Islands, because it's not a big area. However, while looking at Cape Cod and its islands, there's a certain reputation that goes with the Cape. It's not violence. It's a tourist place, a destination, a tourist destination, hot place that everybody in the summer, you want to be there. You want to go there, hence the traffic that we are all fighting in the summer.
Right.
But with the Independence House and also with the Enough Abuse campaign that you're sponsoring or affiliated
We're
with.
collaborators with that around child sexual abuse, preventing child sexual abuse.
So, you guys are bringing to light this dark culture that reflects the whole nation, but also you're bringing to light that this is our dirty laundry. Yes, this is beautiful, gorgeous homes. You got beaches, you get to see the boats, you name it.
Right.
But this is our dirty laundry. And I'm wondering how the community, how people in Cape Cod are responding to you. It's a great cause. But are they ready for you to take out their dirty laundry?
Well, let me just also say that this is a reflection of every town in the nation. Okay, so as far as the community on Cape Cod is very supportive of Independence House in the sense that the donations that we get, the grants that we receive. When I'm out, I'm probably the main person in Independence House that does the outreach. So I'm out in the community a lot more than the counselors. And people will come up to me showing the Clothesline Project or the Silent Witnesses and come up to me and thank me, but I've only been there 8 years, but they got help from Independence House 25 years ago. So people if you're a victim or a survivor, you get it. And saying that, the response from the community is, what an awful problem, I want to help, but it's also very difficult to talk about when you want to talk about changing, or you want to talk about, what are we doing that keeps this going, right? So as a agency that deals with this issue, national, international issue, it's important to keep the Me Too movement alive. It's important to realize that survivors and victims are still out there. And when we can take that stigma away of talking about it, like years ago, nobody wanted to talk about cancer, right? And but the issue of being abused, there's this, even if it's hidden, if it's unconscious, thinking that if you didn't, you could get out of it. You know, there's this feeling that as an adult, you should be able to leave.
Wanted pain rather than, as you mentioned, a cancer where you cannot, if you have it, just not something that you could prevent it. Unless you were smoking, maybe you have a little guilty that, feel a little guilty that I used to smoke. But some cancers, you can control them.
Why can't you leave? And so there's this whole dynamic of power and control. Somebody, the abuser needs power, and they put everything in place to control that. So that you will do anything not to raise the wrath, right? So you'll keep things, you're walking on eggshells all the time. And then there's lots of humiliation, manipulation. They threaten the kids, they threaten money, they threaten to kill the dog. There's all of these dynamics that if you're not in the situation, you will not understand why I can't just walk out the door.
And we're talking about the power and control dynamic. You mentioned the threats. But there are some women or some men going through sexual abuse, violence at home. Not necessarily threats, but somehow from the abuser, they feel that maybe that is love, their interpretation of love. He or she hits me because they love me. I mean, I'm coming from a culture back in Tanzania. There's this tribe that the women strongly feel that if their husbands do not hit them, they are not loved. And we're not talking about a spank. We're not talking about, no, it's a really gruesome, violent situation, but that's their mentality. And I've seen here sometime where women or men will feel, oh, I'm going through this because that's their way of showing me love. Or they have this guilt that if you understand him or her, you will understand why he or she is doing this.
Yeah, there's a lot of dynamics involved. In this country, we have advanced to, if I'm being slapped, yes, some people will say, well, that was just the first time and it won't happen again. But slapping of any kind is an assault, and you can get arrested. Now, to call 911, there's a whole lot of dynamics about that, because by the time they come, the abuser could do something worse. But there is that sense of, well, he just had a bad day, or she, he hasn't done it much. There's that sense that it's going to change.
Yes.
And then then sometimes you just get into it so deep. This is the way
things are.
This is the way things are. In fact, I've had several clients that grew up in a house like that. So to be treated like that was normal, right? Which normal is a strange word.
Yeah.
So, and our culture makes it, to talk about it, stigmatized, so that many people don't share that they are being abused. And today, this is just my opinion, there's more non-physical abuse than abuse, because as I said, any kind of a slap or anything is an assault, and you can, get arrested for that. But the emotional, the mental, the financial abuse, psychological abuse, those are much more prevalent in a relationship, and they are necessarily not against the law.
How are you going to measure it? How are you in the court of law, or how are you really going to say, you can articulate your point, but how are you going to measure that this person has this much emotional abuse in my life, or this much psychological abuse in my life? They're hard to measure. They're hard to detect.
Right.
Unlike bruises, like Chris, what happened to you?
Right.
But you really, those things are very hard to detect. So Independence House, is helping the Cape Cod and its islands?
We just have the Cape Cod. The islands have their own program.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So this is on the Cape Cod. All right.
Okay.
You told me that Independence House has grown.
We have in the last few years.
And I'm happy for you. But this is my question, Chris. What does the growth of Independence House mean?
I think what it means is that it's more awareness. I don't know that there's more abuse and necessarily as more awareness so that people know it's okay to go for help. I don't know the answer to that in the sense of what does it mean to the issue. The issue, is there more abuse versus is there more awareness, and now we're serving people. Our expansion does include a shelter, and then we have, in the last few years, have full-time offices now in Falmouth and Orleans, and also 1 day a week in Provincetown. So we're trying to make access to getting help more effective with having the different satellite offices.
Yeah. There is this notion that what the topic we're talking about, sexual abuse, domestic abuse, are more prevalent in the lower income, poor people, family holds.
It's one of the myths.
It's one of the myths. So tell me, in the Cape Cod, we have many rich communities in the Cape.
So again, I don't have statistics particularly. We do see, my opinion is we do see more people with struggling with income. We do see a lot of the people. One of the possibilities is that people with resources can go somewhere. They can go to their second home. They can go to a hotel. They can take care of this without exposing the fact that they're being abused. But the issue crosses all lines, crosses all ethnicities, races, incomes, genders, everything. Same-sex relationships has the same percentage of abuse. It's not about necessarily men and women, it's about power and control.
And power and control, just because we are human beings, it does not matter your sexual orientation, your economic background.
Right.
It's just the fault of being a human.
So, yeah, and some of the things that we have done we've done awareness where we go out in the community. We give presentations. Some people just want to know what the services are, but sometimes we give presentations to human service providers, let's say on trauma, trauma-informed advocacy is kind of a new term. It's something that we've always done. But on prevention pieces like bystander intervention, what can I do if? We're in the high schools now with different curriculums. The Enough Abuse campaign that you mentioned, it's about preventing child sexual abuse. It's a community-based campaign. It's getting anybody in the community aware of the signs of sexual abuse so that we could, right now, we have taught children correct language of their body parts to say what's happening. We've taught children who can you trust? Don't talk to strangers. But that gives the burden of disclosing to the child, right? So as adults, we need to be aware of different signs. Is their behavior changing? Are they withdrawing more? Are they not eating? What are the signs? It doesn't mean there's abuse, but it's worth just digging a little deeper of what's happening with the child. So Independence House is part of a collaborative effort to, we have trained trainers and we go out and do presentations to the public venues, to teachers, to nurses, that kind of thing.
Now it's most of the time it's said that your abuser, somebody you know. Most occasions your abuser, somebody you know. So when you talk about training the kids on whom to trust and whom not to trust, it's your inherent, when you're a child, even now, you know that my mom, my dad, I need to trust them first.
Right.
So what happens? How do you teach them when that abuser, that villain, comes from your own household, the person that you inherently trust?
Right. That's exactly the point. And the point is not to train the child in the sense that, again, it's an adult. Adults need to step up. And so what we talk about in these trainings is, you're absolutely right. As a child, if it's somebody you know, whether it's family or a coach or somebody that's close to the family, this is the person, you know, a little kid is going through all these emotions without putting them to words, right? This is a person I'm supposed to trust. I guess it's okay. And touch is okay. You know, people need to be touched, right? Touch is okay. Doesn't always feel good, but I like it, and it gives me presents. So I guess it's everything. You know, so a child has enough going on without being abused, and so that's why this different signs. And so the parents need to be aware, and if it's the mother or the father, you have to give the child this room to say what's going on, and it's okay. I'm going to believe you. It's not your fault. You know, it's a case by case kind of scenario. But you're absolutely right. It's a confusing time for the child, so the parent needs to be aware of signs. And if it's your husband or your wife or your aunt or your brother, you need to step up.
Definitely, you really need to step up. So even the adults, they really need to know the signs, and they really know how to handle this, you know. And sometimes you're looking at, if it's a mom or dad, of course they feel financial burden. It's like, can I afford to break up a family? Can I afford to take my kids and run away from this man who is the sole provider?
Right.
So those are hard things.
Finances are one of the main reasons why people stay, because part of the strategies of abusers is to keep them, control them, right? So the relationship starts out with, oh, honey, you don't have to work. I'll take care of you. You know, I can do this. You can stay home, take care of the kids. And then, they just don't have a source of income. And many times they take over the checkbook. I've had cases where serving clients that he came home at lunch and touched the television, make sure he hadn't been watching TV. You know, that's really extremely confidential.
Goodness.
But the lack of reaching out because you don't have any money, and then checkbook is in his name, credit cards are in his name, or they get a credit card, put her name on it, run it up, and if they do break up, she's got all this debt. So there's lots of
it happens. And now to another question. I mean, this is just in general for all communities. And I'm going to say this very broadly, but I think we all know somebody who could use some help. A woman or a man who needs to get out, who needs to reinvent their life, and they could use the break. I personally know a few women. I have helped a person very close to me to get out of a bad relationship. How can families, friends intervene? How can you intervene?
So the biggest challenge of being an advocate is waiting. Because the person has had no power, has no voice, right? This relationship has squashed them. And with that, even unknowingly, your ego and your self-confidence is less and less, right? So the first response of most people, if I was to say, what's going on with you? Most of the time, first response is denial. I've noticed that you're not as happy as you used to. I noticed a couple of bruises. You know, what's going on? And so the first response will probably be denial, right? And the biggest challenge is not taking over, because their life is taken over. Our job is about empowering them, right, to make decisions. So my suggestion in counseling is that let them know that you care about them, that you're concerned. Give them the hotline number to Independence House. They probably won't use it, but now they know that you are an advocate and that there is a resource out there. Always keep the communication open. A friend of mine's daughter was in an awful relationship. The abuser wouldn't let her call, wouldn't let her do anything, right? I said, just keep calling her, leaving the message. When she's ready, she'll know that you have not forgotten her.
Yeah. Chris, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to cut you off. I think we are running out of time. We have so much to talk about, but I'm happy that at least our viewers know about Independence House and they know the work that you do over there, so they can reach out. And we did include the number, your number, hotline number, and the credits. So thank you for joining us this morning. This is the Good Morning Wareham show. We'll be back Friday. Reruns of this episode is tonight at 6. Next week, Friday, we're going to have a gentleman from the Disaster Specialist here to talk about how they can help you with your home or office disasters. Until next time, I wish you all a wonderful day.